The pen in his hand was trembling, not from weakness, from panic. Across the long conference table, every executive sat frozen, not a single word, not a breath. The silence was brutal, the kind that cuts deeper than shouting, the kind that tells you everything is already falling apart. Logan Cross, billionaire, boardroom legend, corporate steel, was seconds away from losing the biggest deal of his career. The Swiss conglomerate was on their way upstairs. The translator they'd hired for months had disappeared without a trace. No backup, no plan B, just one fragile thread keeping the company from plummeting into a PR and financial nightmare. And then, I spoke. My voice was soft, shaky, almost stupid. I speak German. Heads turned, eyes narrowed. I wasn't wearing a suit. I wasn't on the meeting list. I was holding a mop, and I wasn't supposed to exist. But sometimes, the person who isn't supposed to be anything becomes the only one who can change everything. If you're still here, stick with us. This story will flip everything you think you know about power, potential, and the people we ignore. And don't forget to subscribe to John's Stories channel for more gripping stories like this, every single day. My name is Claire Baldwin, and for 3 years, I was invisible. Not literally, of course. People saw the mop. They heard the squeaky wheels of my cleaning cart. They smelled the lemon disinfectant. But me? Claire? The woman behind the uniform? I was wallpaper. The background in their billion-dollar lives. Until the day I dared to speak. It was a Monday, crisp and cruel, and I had already spilled coffee on my third-hand sneakers before the sun came up. My mother was having another bad morning, the kind where her breathing wheezed like an old accordion and she wouldn't eat, no matter how gently I begged. But I couldn't miss work. Rent was due, and Cross Point didn't care if your world was falling apart. Floors still needed mopping. So there I was, pushing my cart across the marble floor of the 42nd floor boardroom, hoping to be forgotten as usual, when the air changed. You can feel panic, you know? It's not loud, it's tight. It's the way people avoid each other's eyes, the way their voices lower, trying not to betray the tremor underneath. I had cleaned enough of these rooms to know the difference between a meeting and a meltdown. At the center of it all was Logan Cross, the infamous young CEO who built Cross Point with a jawline of stone and a temper made of steel. He looked composed, but I could see it in his eyes, the storm behind the ice. His hand gripped a silver pen like it was the only thing holding him together. "They said the translator canceled?" he asked, voice clipped. His assistant nodded, unfazed as though she'd expected this train to derail. "Personal emergency," she replied coolly. No one dared say what they were all thinking. This deal is toast. That's when my voice betrayed me. "I speak German." I hadn't meant to say it. Honestly, I don't even remember deciding. It just spilled out. Like the part of me that had been waiting, screaming to be acknowledged, finally broke through. The room turned. Faces twisted. Amusement, disbelief, disgust. I was a cleaner, a ghost. My name wasn't even listed in the staff directory. And now I had interrupted a billion-dollar disaster with, what? A suggestion? "Excuse me?" Logan said, slowly, like he wasn't sure he'd heard me right. I cleared my throat. I studied in Berlin. I'm fluent. And I took some business electives before I dropped out. I can help if you let me. The silence in that room was louder than any shout. People think courage is bold and loud, but it's not. It's standing there while the world laughs at you, and choosing not to flinch. His assistant scoffed first. "You think you can fill in for a certified interpreter with a PhD in business linguistics?" I wanted to shrink. I wanted to disappear. But then, Logan did something unexpected. He nodded once, short, precise, like cutting through noise. Let her try. Now, let me be clear. I was terrified. Every step to that table felt like walking on ice above an abyss. My uniform still smelled like bleach. My hands trembled as I held the contract pages. But when the Swiss delegates entered and spoke in rapid-fire German, I found myself answering before I had time to doubt. And they listened. Their faces didn't contort in confusion. They didn't smirk. They leaned forward. Line by line, I translated. But I didn't just translate. I clarified. I added insights. I remembered the logistics memo I wasn't supposed to read, the one someone left in the recycling bin last week. I referenced it, casually, mentioned the Eastern Europe angle, cost-saving strategies, shipment efficiencies. At one point, Hans Meyer, the lead Swiss negotiator, broke into a slow, impressed smile. "You're not a janitor," he said, in English, tipping his head. And in that moment, I wasn't. Logan didn't smile, not yet, but I saw something shift in his expression. Not relief, not even surprise, respect. By the end of the meeting, the Swiss shook hands and confirmed the deal. They even requested I join future meetings. When they left, the silence that followed felt electric, like something sacred had just happened. And then, just like that, I wheeled my cart out of the room. Because fairy tales always have a clock ticking, and mine would strike midnight faster than I could imagine.
I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch in our one-bedroom apartment, listening to the faint hum of a broken fridge and my mom's shallow breathing from behind the curtain we hung to give her privacy. The city lights bled through our cracked blinds like a quiet reminder this wasn't a dream. And yet, it felt like one. The man who ran a company worth billions, Logan Cross, had looked me in the eye. Not past me, not through me, at me, as if I mattered, as if what I said carried weight. That terrified me more than anything else. See, when you've been invisible for so long, being seen feels violent. Your skin itches with attention. Your heart races at the thought that someone might believe in you, and yet a part of you begs not to be forgotten again. The next day, I showed up earlier than usual. I wore the same uniform, but I pulled my hair back tighter, wiped my sneakers clean with a rag, just in case. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. At exactly 9:07 a.m., Logan appeared at the janitor's closet door. No assistant, no guards, just him. "You're not scheduled for any more meetings today," I stammered, already gripping the mop. He replied, "I know. I want to talk." He led me down the hallway, a place I had only ever passed through with my head down. The door he opened wasn't the grand boardroom, but a smaller space. A war room, maybe. Whiteboards, flowcharts, coffee stains, and brilliance. And then he said something that knocked the wind from me. "I want you on my team." I blinked. "I don't have a degree, no credentials, you don't even know my last name." He smiled, a rare one. "I don't care what's on paper. I care about what you did when everything was falling apart." I felt my knees wobble, but I straightened my spine. "I'll do my best." He nodded once. "That's all I ask." And just like that, the girl who mopped floors was now drafting financial memos, learning market insights, sitting in on meetings, silently at first, then gradually offering opinions. Not everyone was thrilled. Vivian Hart, his assistant, watched me like a hawk. She smiled with her teeth, but never with her eyes. Every time I entered a room, I could feel her resentment like static in the air. But Logan? He changed. At first, he was all sharp corners, precise words, always in motion. But then came those late nights when he stayed behind, reviewing projections while sipping bitter coffee. And I stayed too. "I don't sleep much," he said one evening, staring out the window. "I know the feeling," I replied, tapping away at my notes. "Tell me about your mom," he asked gently, surprising me. So I did. I told him about the stroke, the hospital bills, the caregiving, about Berlin and scholarships I had once won, about the dream of getting a degree that now felt like a fairy tale I'd read to myself on lonely nights. He listened. No interruptions, no empty nods. Just listened. And then he told me about the accident, the one that took his parents when he was just 14, how his uncle, Gregory Cross, took over his upbringing like a hostile corporate takeover, groomed him not with love, but expectation, built him into a leader, but not a son. The vulnerability in his voice that night, it was raw, and something in me broke for him. "You're not weak, Logan," I whispered. He looked at me, long and hard, then reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. That touch, so simple, was the loudest thing in the room. From that moment on, we weren't just CEO and assistant. We weren't even janitor and boss. We were something more dangerous. We were allies. But peace doesn't last in places built on power. One morning, I walked in to find whispers flying like wildfire. There'd been a leak, Swiss documents, sensitive information, traced back to my email, except I hadn't sent anything. Vivian's smirk told me everything. I was suspended within an hour. People who'd applauded me days before now avoided my gaze. No one asked if it was true. No one gave me the benefit of the doubt. Logan didn't show up. Not that day. Not the next. I packed my things in silence, left the building without fanfare, walked 3 blocks in the rain until my clothes clung to my skin and my spirit felt like it would collapse. I got home and found my mother asleep, peaceful, unaware. I cried like a child until my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Meet me. Parking garage. Now. I ran. Literally. There he was, drenched in rain, waiting by his black SUV. "You think I did it?" I asked before I even stopped moving. "No," he said softly, "but they do, and they're using it." Vivian. And Gregory. His eyes were fire now. They want the board to believe I'm unstable, that I let a janitor sabotage a $1 billion contract. My throat went dry. What do? We fight. Together. That was the first time he looked at me not with pity, not even respect, but with trust. He had already hired an independent cybersecurity firm to trace the leak, and the early results, the metadata from the leaked files had been manipulated, the sender ID spoofed. It was all a setup. They wanted to burn us both, but we're going to flip the script. And that's exactly what we did. In secret, we flew to Zurich 3 days before the official renegotiation. We met Hans and his team in private, laid out our evidence, our plan, our updated strategy. Hans was skeptical until I started speaking German again, not just translating, guiding, pitching, proposing optimizations. They listened. When we left that room, they agreed to back us quietly for now. But it was enough. Back in New York, the trap was already closing. Vivian had filed an internal report, Gregory had summoned the board, a special vote to remove Logan. They claimed he'd lost control, that he was compromising the company with sentimental favoritism, but they didn't know what we were walking in with. Have you ever had a moment where pretending led to something unexpectedly real? Please comment below and like this video if you believe the best love stories start with honesty. Subscribe our channel now for more powerful story-based videos every day. The boardroom felt colder that morning, not because of the AC, but because betrayal sat in the room like a guest no one had invited. Gregory Cross, silver hair sharp as his tongue, stood at the head of the table like he already owned the place. He wore confidence like a crown. Beside him, Vivian Hart, impeccable in her black sheath dress, had that snake-slick smile she wore when she thought she'd already won. They had timed it perfectly. The Swiss deal had collapsed, or so they believed. Logan was isolated. His protege, me, painted as a traitor. Now all that was left was the vote. Logan entered 5 minutes late. On purpose. He wasn't rattled. He wasn't rushed. He was calm, collected, dangerous. I followed 3 steps behind him, wearing the exact same janitor uniform I'd worn the first day we met. Let them think I was nothing. Again. That would be their mistake. Gregory stood. This emergency session was called due to a breach of trust at the highest level. Our CEO authorized an unqualified employee to represent the company in international negotiations, which resulted in the leak of sensitive data and damaged our credibility. A murmur swept the room. Tension, doubt, fear. Vivian stepped forward with a manila folder. "The documents speak for themselves," she said sweetly, passing them down like communion. Logan let the silence stretch. Then he opened his laptop and projected something onto the screen behind him. Metadata, IP logs, forensic digital footprints, and one name blinking at the bottom, Vivian Hart. Her smile froze. I hired a third-party cyber firm because I trusted Claire Baldwin, and I was right to. He turned toward her, toward me. Claire never sent that email, but Vivian did, from a disguised proxy using Claire's login credentials and time-stamped access tied to a terminal inside this building. Gasps, disbelief, fear. Gregory turned pale. Furthermore, Logan continued, I traveled to Zurich last week, met with Hans Meyer in person, and I'm pleased to announce that the Swiss deal has not only been salvaged, it's been improved by 11.6% profitability on logistics cost reductions thanks to Claire's insights. He turned back to the board. The people you're considering removing are the ones who just secured this company's future. Vivian's face contorted, a storm of fury and fear. This is a stunt. You're trying to protect a janitor? Logan turned to her slowly. No, I'm recognizing a strategist and exposing a saboteur. Then his eyes landed on Gregory. You taught me everything I know about power, about control, but not about integrity. I learned that on my own, and today I choose integrity. Gregory stood, voice shaking with rage. You'll regret this. But the damage was done. The room had turned. Board members whispered among themselves. One after another, they nodded toward Mr. Carter, the head of governance. Within minutes, a vote was called. Vivian was removed, effective immediately. Gregory, forced into early retirement. Just like that, the Titans fell. And I stood in the same room where I'd once swept floors, watching the powerful squirm under the weight of their own schemes. Logan came to me after the vote, his expression unreadable. Then, with a softness I hadn't seen in weeks, he whispered, I told you, I trust you. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, eyes stinting, but I nodded. Later that evening, we stood on the rooftop. The city buzzed below, unaware of the war we just survived. The skyline shimmered, glass and neon, an endless possibility. Logan turned to me, his voice barely above the wind. You know, they tried to use your invisibility against you. I smiled, but it made their blind spot. We laughed. Then we didn't. He stepped closer. You saved my company, he said. But more than that, you saved me. My heart raced. I did it because I believe in you, Logan. Not the title, not the suits. You. And I believe in you, Claire. Not as a mistake, not as a janitor, as the woman who rewrote my future. I don't remember who leaned in first, but when our lips met, it wasn't cinematic or staged. It was soft, earnest, real. A beginning, not an ending. The next week, something extraordinary happened. Crosspoint Industries held a recognition ceremony, a rare public event where employees were honored for contributions beyond their role. Every seat was filled. Executives, international partners, press. Logan stood at the podium first. He spoke of resilience, of transparency, of learning to see talent where others only saw titles. Then he called my name. Claire Baldwin, please join me on stage. As I walked up, still wearing the only nice dress I owned, I felt the room tilt. Not in fear, but in awe. I took the mic. My voice trembled, but only for a second. I used to think I didn't belong in places like this, that I was invisible, that potential only mattered if you had the right resume. I looked at Logan. His eyes held nothing but pride. But then someone believed in me, and I realized no one stays invisible forever if they have the courage to speak. Applause rose like a wave. For the first time in years, I stood tall. Not because someone allowed it, but because I chose it. That night, after the speeches, after the cameras, Logan pulled me aside. "You're not just part of this company now. You're part of my story." I smiled. "You're mine too." And then we just existed. Not as CEO and former janitor, not even as romantic cliches. Just two people who saw each other fully. Let me tell you something real. Not every underdog story ends with roses. Not every betrayal gets exposed in time. Sometimes the janitor doesn't get noticed. Sometimes the boardroom remains blind. But sometimes someone speaks up. And when they do, the world has no choice but to listen. So if you're watching this right now, wondering if your voice matters, it does. Whether you're sweeping floors or climbing charts, brilliance isn't reserved for pedigrees. It lives in grit, in kindness, in those who risk humiliation to say, "I can help." Remember Claire Baldwin. Remember what happened when she spoke. After the applause faded and the crowd scattered back into the city's pulse, I sat alone in the same chair where I once watched others make history. This time, I wasn't cleaning up after it. I was part of it. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't still carry a sliver of doubt in my pocket. That night, back at our tiny apartment, my mother looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. She didn't say much, just squeezed my hand gently and whispered, "I always knew." And in that moment, I didn't need a corner office or a press release. I just needed that. You know, this story might sound like a fairy tale, but it's not. It's a story of seeing and being seen, of one moment changing a life, of courage found not on a pedestal, but on the cracked tiles of a mop closet. And before you think this is too cinematic to be real, let me tell you about someone I once met in Detroit. His name was Chris Allen. Chris was a night security guard in a mid-tier tech company. Quiet, middle-aged, nobody in management really remembered his name. But he had a habit of walking through the building on his break, not just to check security panels, but because he liked reading the whiteboards in the development room. He didn't understand all of it, but he'd worked retail for 20 years. He understood customers, how they talk, how they think. One night, he saw a sketch of an app interface. Something clicked. He grabbed a Post-it note and wrote, "Add this feature. My daughter uses an app like this and always complains about the missing search function." The next day, the product team laughed, but they tried the change. And 2 weeks later, during a beta demo, that one tweak became the highlight of the user experience. The execs took credit, Of course they did. But the developers, they remembered Chris. 6 months later, he was offered a full-time position in UX testing. No degree, no training, just insight, presence, curiosity. See, brilliance doesn't come with a badge. Sometimes it wears a janitor's name tag, or sits behind a guard desk, or waits tables at a diner while practicing pitch decks in its head during 10-minute breaks. I've realized something since that day on the 42nd floor. We often walk through life blindfolded by credentials, titles, suits. We assume that power only exists at the top, that leadership is a birthright, that contribution must be validated by degrees. But the truth? Sometimes the strongest voice in the room is the one no one invited to speak. Sometimes the smartest mind is the quiet one in the back, translating not just language, but understanding. And sometimes, a woman in a janitor's uniform changes the future of a corporation because she refused to let silence define her. I've been asked why I didn't sue, why I didn't demand back pay, promotions, headlines. The truth? What I gained was louder than any compensation. A seat at the table? Sure. But also a voice that couldn't be ignored anymore. And Logan? He didn't just offer me a job. He offered me recognition, trust, a mirror to see myself through, unclouded by shame. We still work late some nights, though now it's at the same table with the same title, partner. Sometimes he jokes, "You're the only strategist I've ever had who can also unclog the break room sink." We laugh, because now it's just part of the story. So, to anyone watching, especially if you feel small, overlooked, invisible, don't let their blindness define your worth. Your voice is valid, even if it shakes. Your insight is valuable, even if it's dismissed. And your presence, it might be the very thing that saves the room when no one else can. So speak, even when they laugh, even when they turn, even when the room falls silent. Because you never know which moment will change your life or someone else's forever. Before we close, let me leave you with this. It takes less than a second to doubt yourself, and sometimes a lifetime to unlearn it. But courage, real courage, it's showing up anyway. Offering what you have, where you are, with no guarantee they'll listen. Claire Baldwin did that. Chris Allen did that. And maybe you can too. So if you ever find yourself in the back of the room staring at giants, remember, even giants have blind spots. And you might just be the vision they need. Thanks for staying with me through this journey. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of someone who deserves to be seen, share it. And make sure you hit subscribe to John's Stories channel so we can keep bringing light to the invisible, one story at a time. Because sometimes fiction reflects the truth more clearly than fact ever could. Until next time, keep watching, keep believing, and whatever happens, don't stay silent.